And a special salutation to the President of SODA and to the entire Surface team. I think it is a great innovation from our collective dimension that is going to take us quite far. I'm going to be talking about the kingdoms that care. Now, I decided to call it the kingdoms that care and not the kingdom that cares, to remove any undertones of tribalism. The kingdoms that care should be a philosophy that any other kingdom can embrace and help itself with. So it shouldn't be just a sort of thing. If I were to move straight to the point, I want to say that what I'm talking about is another provocative idea that is trying to look forward on what we can do when this crisis gives us a little time or a little opportunity, and perhaps when the crisis is over. Considering that we don't know when the crisis might get over, we have to seize opportunities. Immediately, there is a chance. And I have looked at a situation where, like someone said, before the crisis, we had multiple unresolved crises. Part of it was that our youths were already drifting towards more of what is negative than what is constructive and building to the fondom. It is true, we had a lot of education going on. Primary education was going on. But if you go into many villages, you realize that a lot of youth deviance was being visualized. What we are seeing today is merely a product of what was hidden when the crisis was not yet where we are. And so the kingdoms that care is a proposal that we can collectively embrace. I am still developing it, and the written form is undergoing a little editing. Now, the kingdoms that care is a community-wide program. It is broad-based, and it is a preventive program against negative youth behavior. I am looking at it as something that we can use for post-war rehabilitation or post-war reorientation of our youth's mindset. So what exactly is the problem? The problem is that we are living the ugly consequence of war. We have arms in circulation, we have massive exodus. Douala, for example, Bongnativ is suffering a great deal from IDPs. Feeding is a problem. We have health challenges. Youth have been exposed to a life of abuse. Many of our girls' children are working as house girls. There is prostitution. We have substance abuse, and of course, crime coming out of that. Beyond this, there are a lot of behavioral and psychological problems. You can imagine how stressed and depressed our youths are, with a lot of anxiety. Their dreams have been derailed, and even the families. And the issue is, we do not have a collective approach.
On dit de brûler la gorge.
We don't have a collective approach on
non,
how
brûler c'est péjoratif, non?
I'm getting some now.
De chauffer la gorge.
Hello, are we okay?
Yes, it's okay. It's okay, Shey Tadze. I think someone was speaking. I hope I've blocked the person.
Okay,
go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm saying that so far, we don't have a collective approach on how to approach or solve our youth's problems. Now, since we are going to have the problems multiply, we need to think, and I'm proposing the kingdoms that care. The kingdom that care, as I mentioned, is targeting negative and unhealthy behavior from the youth. When I say it's a coalition-based preventive system, I mean it's a program where if we were to take, for example, a single community like Mbiami, you realize that youth from Mbiami have unique and common ways or negative behaviors. If there are positive behaviors, they are also unique. If you go to Nse or Kimbo or any other community, they have commonalities on the way their youths operate. So the objective is to prevent these unhealthy behaviors and stop child trafficking, stop female child abuse, stop female child exploitation, stop youth violence, alcohol and substance abuse. And of course, we know all the negatives that follow this. It is a program I'm also suggesting that will take away something I've always called willful blindness. And so first is a typical example of people who have come together and they have agreed, they've accepted not to be blind. Not to be blind on things they know are there, but they pretend they do not exist. We know our problems as poor people. And so when we take off this veil and accept not to be blind on what is true, it is going to take us forward. We know the target will be the youths, the families, the schools, cultural clubs, meeting groups, any forum where ideas can be sold, our churches, and so on. And the vision, we have not yet had any scientifically conducted research where we can be able to score the level of deviance or unhealthy behavior in our community. But we can be able to observe and see that things have moved a little bit towards the ugly side. And so our vision should be to drop these negative consequences in about a decade after the war.
Shey
So the
Tadze.
mission,
Yeah.
yes.
So sorry, you must stop here. Yeah, your camera. Maybe some people are saying that they are not able to see your face. And if you adjust it a bit, I think people want to actually see you. I've got that comment. But if you cannot adjust it, that's fine. Yeah, it's quite okay that way. Sorry, I had to disturb you. It's quite fine that way now. I think.
Okay. I just
okay.
need to.
It's quite okay.
Okay.
Sorry
all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, now thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I was all right. I was saying that the mission of the kingdom that care is that we seek to strengthen individuals, strengthen families, and strengthen communities on how we can reinforce healthy behaviors in our communities, in our youth. So we need to pull all community efforts together, meaning that if we went to one community, for example, if we took Vekovi, for example, we want to pull all the community efforts in Vekovi together towards one objective in an organized manner so that everything that concerns the youth in Vekovi, for example, should not be individualized to households. It should be a whole community concern. And they should have an agreeable approach. Because when we go to these communities, you will realize that the problems related to youth in those communities will be the same. And it is very easy for a community to agree on what to do and on how to solve the problems. The approach is based on a social development strategy. When I talk of social development strategy, I mean it takes a systematic approach. First of all, we have to focus and know that we are promoting positive youth development and positive youth behavior, preventing negative behavior. We cannot do it if we don't even know what is happening in each community, meaning that if we go to each community, we need to collect data. We need to have some rough survey. There is a questionnaire that I am developing alongside this program, so that that questionnaire can serve across the board in any community. When you do the rough scientific survey, you can now be able to prioritize the predictors, those predictors of negative behavior in those particular communities. And you can be able to generate solutions, propose solutions, and agree on an effective program, each community agreeing on how to confront them. Now, when we use the social development strategy, we are thinking of enhancing individual relationship. It can't work if in every society the community does not work together. We are thinking of youth servicing programs. There's a youth department, but you realize that as a people, we might not be able to isolate our youth programs from some of the youth programs that already exist, maybe the way the churches are managing our youth, the way the government is approaching it. But I think we can modify it. We can add ingredients to them. So the steps into the kingdom that care are well organized. The first thing is, if we embrace it and we take it to a community like Miami, the first thing will be to identify and address the readiness of the various communities to work. You cannot take an idea to a community if the people are not ready to work. We organize and get community members involved. Bring together the diverse efforts that they have, because each community will have diverse efforts. We set priorities for action. Now, funding could be an issue. Where funding becomes an issue, we now have to work together and see how we can generate funding, where we can get the funding come from, if we could promote the spirit of volunteerism. Once this is done and we have clearly defined and measurable outcomes, we can now identify the little gaps where problems can arise and implement the program. I try to look at those risk factors that exist in our society now. Like I said, it is not yet based on any scientifically proven research, but it is based on those factors that have been tested and proven across the globe in other countries. And it has been identified that we have 20 risk factors in every community. In some communities, there could be less. In some, there could be many. Yes, but generally, we have 20 risk factors, ranging from media portrayals of violence, community availability of drugs, availability of firearms, constitutional factors, rebelliousness, gang involvement, community behaviors, transitions of mobility, and favorable or unfavorable parental attitudes. Now, there are many of them, but I wanted to indicate that the outcomes of all these 20 risk factors, the major outcomes are 5 of them. And the 5 are substance abuse, delinquency, teenage pregnancy, school dropouts, and violence. Now, if we go to all our communities, we realize that this is what they saw condom. There is some noise in the background. These 5, our communities are suffering from them, and we need to look for a way to remedy them. Let us take, for example, if we go up to regions around Kum, where there's a lot of substance abuse, there's marijuana being planted left and right, you will realize that the problems that exist around that community are common. Delinquency is common. Now, if we cut across the board, we realize that teenage pregnancy is already something that it is as if it is already part of us. But I can imagine that in every household in so there is a teenage pregnancy or children owned by single parents. There are so many of them. So the solution can be, or the program can be aiming at how can we drive our youth attitudes in such a way that some of these problems can be reduced. We can't reduce them overnight. That is why I am calling it a program that can run for about 10 years. The families must be involved. Schools must be involved. And where the families are involved, parental and infancy mindsets need to be reactivated. What do our parents tell our children by the fireside? What type of early childhood education do they receive? What type of parenting training exists in our community? I remember when we were growing up, if you look at each big compound, each laekuni, you realize that children from that compound always have some peculiarities. Either they are too good, they are too humble, they are very hospitable, or they are violent. It depends on what they are told, how they are brought up, what constitutes the culture of that big compound. So at the level of schools, the schools are already there. We are not operating community schools where we might be able to change the curriculum and define how things can be done. But we have systems in place with organized curricula that first, through PTA, can be able to introduce ideas will uphold and promote our children's positive behavior. That is where I say schools are involved. We also have individuals. In communities, you have people who are really interested in children welfare. In communities, you have some people who are very dangerous and the kind of people you wouldn't want your children to associate with them. And so the program will have to look at each child as an individual and try to build situations where in every community, each child has a mentor. We try to know with whom is our child associating, and that should be part of the parenting work. The community as a whole, as a nation, cannot be undermined. Now, the general objective is what? To build a protection against negative behavior in our youth. The first is to make sure that the communities are committed to the cause, that the schools embrace the ideas and pass them over, so that even in school, violence, like you heard what was happening in Yaoundé recently, where they say that the child went to school with a knife. It won't be long if after the war or after the crisis, we do nothing and tomorrow we find a child in class with a gun. In that direction and look at our root, the situation of our youth. The kingdom that care is in well-organized stages and 5 phases. In phase 1, there's a document that I've detailed all of this, and I cannot expose all of them here. But we are going to, as time permits, when the document is out, the entire phase team will have the whole package. But just summarily, to understand that at phase 1, we have in every I have to meet that. And we have a phase 2 where we have to organize and introduce the program, getting the people involved. In phase 3, each community's profile is developed because some surveying must have been done within that community, and common children or common youth profile.
Oh no. Just a moment, everyone. I think Shey Tadze, if you can hear me, your mic is muted. I don't know what happened.
Of course, I propose also the milestones and the supporting documents. That's technical documents involving how it can be implemented. That I am not going to detail here, but it's just for our knowledge to know that it is considered. Then we have a timeline from phase 1 to phase 5 on how in each community from the first week to the second to the 9th week and perhaps to a year, how each phase can be implemented. But what we should be asking ourselves is, what are we aiming out? What are the expected outcomes? It is expected that we'll observe improvement in the quality of our youth's behavior, which should be something that should be observable in about 4 to 5 years. Because as we begin, we might not have results spontaneously. We have to observe an increased use of this program in the various communities. Because if we start in one community and another community doesn't embrace it, we might not feel it across the entire kingdom. So multiple communities have to get involved and have to be mobilized, be involved as one. We have to observe that we have had sufficient training, because for every community, the kind of people who can propagate these ideas will not be a big team, but they can be trained on how it can be done. So positive outcomes are those things we expect to be documented at the end of the day. But in a nutshell, I am trying to say that we need to look at the post-crisis period as a kingdom that cares, where the child in every community should be everybody's burden. What happens to the child of Tamfomi should be the concern of Ngwang. And what happens to the child in that compound should be the concern of a parent in the other compound. That saying, when each community must have set a target that we want to change our children's mindset towards this direction, they are going to be collaborating. If in that community, for example, people economically live from marijuana, that community will collectively decide that the act of farming and selling marijuana should be stopped. Once it is collectively agreed and it's a community-based agreement, that is where the kingdoms that care can be able to assist us after the crisis. Of course, there's no doubt that as small as we are, a small group of thoughtful and committed citizens, a group of thoughtful and committed people can be able to change the entire fandom. Thank you very much for listening. I think I tried to summarize it as much as possible so that we don't take so much of our time. But the written document, once it is completed, will be made available so that we can study it very closely and see how it can be implemented and how it can work. I've discussed a few times with the president of Nsoda, and I've sent the document also to Tap Jumbam Martin so that he can also have an eye on it. Thank you so much. I hope the microphone wasn't stubborn.
Kivashio. Viratura Bikivashio. Viratura Bikivashio.